Hello, and welcome back to the Animal Communicator and Healer Summit. This is the place for aspiring and established animal communicators and healers to connect with animals, to connect with their abilities, and to connect with each other. I'm your host, Dr. Cara Gubbins, founder of the Animal Wisdom Circle and creator of How to Talk to Your Pet, the proven 4-step system that teaches anyone and everyone how to communicate intuitively with their pets or with any animal. And today we have Diana DelMonte joining us, and we're going to be talking about animal communication and other tools for finding lost pets. Diana DelMonte is an artist, educator, and animal communicator who's internationally sought after for her expertise in resolving behavioral problems and locating lost pets. She's also experienced in working with dying animals and animals in spirit. She's a Reiki master and healer initiated in the Andean shamanic tradition of Peru. She's a certified Kundalini yoga teacher, a Zen yogi, and a vegan for 28 years. Diana practices a path of ahimsa, the Buddhist doctrine of refraining from harming any living being. She's the author of 3 books and the Spirit Wisdom Animal Oracle deck. And Diana lives in Los Angeles with her 3 feline companions. You can find her online at dianadelmonte.com. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's so great to just connect with you, and the body of your work is so holistic. You've brought in so many pieces from so many different disciplines: Buddhism, shamanism, animal communication, all into one package, which makes me super curious about how you came to be here. So let's start with your story. How did you become an animal communicator?
It's interesting because I was always a skeptic. I didn't, my parents weren't rescue people. They didn't, I didn't live on a ranch, or I wasn't hearing animals when I was 5 years old. I just had very minimal relationships with animals when I was growing up. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s and I was a skeptic. I was an artist. I was open to this, but I really didn't really believe it was possible. I thought that it was kind of wacky. And one day I was writing at my desk and my pen ran out of ink. So I walked through the house to find another pen. And just as I was walking into my partner's music studio, I heard, thoughts in my mind very clear: look out, I'm down here. And I looked down and there was my cat Bubby, and he was staring up at me. And I thought to myself, did I hear him? And I dismissed it. I didn't believe it. And then a couple months later, I was petting him in the sunlight. So I was very focused just in the warmth of his body and so forth. And then all of a sudden, I got an image, just a flash of Bubby straining to urinate. And he used to have, and he had a history of urinary blockages. So I wondered if he was telling me if he was having problems, and I dismissed it. This is how skeptical I was. I thought, oh no, it was a coincidence. And so it happened again. And then I thought, I think I'm hearing my animals. And that's when I started training and learning more, because, in the beginning, it's hard to differentiate between your thought and the animals. But it was really my own cats who really opened me to this.
And one of the things I love about your story is you heard words, but you also saw pictures, which I think dispels a lot of myths that people have about animal communication is like a word language that you have to hear.
It's so true. And when I teach this, I really emphasize that, because that's why we all have the ability, because we all have images in our mind, whether we're aware of them or not. We all have thoughts, obviously. We hear words in our mind, and we all have feelings in our body. And this is what animal communication is. It's just becoming more aware, because we just, it's so natural that we're unconsciously doing it all the time, and we're not even aware of it. So you make people aware that they have the ability. They're already doing it. Just pay attention.
And that's so much of Buddhist training too.
Yes, it
So
is.
many practices around the world is just let's bring our awareness to what's already happening that we just don't pay attention to.
Exactly.
So how did you go from that to really specializing in the lost pets and the behavioral issues?
Well, the behavioral problems, you know, I just started doing a lot of them. And so that's just how that kind of happened. Lost animals, same thing. I didn't really want to do them, but those were the bulk of my calls. And so I just accepted what the universe was handing me. And I don't, they're very stressful and they're emotionally draining. And I can't say that I enjoy doing them, but people keep calling and I keep doing them. Yeah. And so I've been doing this probably lost animals probably I don't know, 15 or 20 years.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. So when you started out, did you do things any differently than you do now, 25 years later? I mean, you must have really created a whole system and a process for approaching lost pets and
I
finding
have.
them.
I've added a lot. I've included a lot, and I like to talk a little bit about that process. But I think in the beginning, I might have I might have done more communication with the animal. Now I'm more focused on just trying to um, get a location description. So I don't really care if the animal's in the backyard chasing butterflies. I mean, what is, this is not going to help somebody find their animal. So I'm more interested in really zooming in on location.
So when you get a call about a lost pet, how do you start?
The first thing I do, we work from photographs. So the first thing I do is I stare at the photograph because sometimes, not all the time, I sense a light when an animal has passed on. So I look to see, am I sensing this light? And that's the first thing I do. And then I go further with a body scan because my body scans are pretty accurate. And what I have found for myself, and this isn't for everybody, this is just my own sign. I will feel um, a pain in my neck and shoulder area when an animal has been taken from by a predator, or excuse me, if they're in spirit. And sometimes I'll feel, a lot of pain throughout the whole body. And so this will validate, like if I think, if I sense a light and then I get this pain, well, then there's no question in my mind. Of course, I'm never 100% positive, certain either way. It's hard sometimes for me to really determine, but that's how the beginning part. And then, I call this my initial session because if I'm really booked but someone has an emergency, I do this initial session for them, what I just described, and then I go and ask very basic questions. Are you safe? Do you feel you're very far from home? Um, can you get back? Do you know your way back? And if I hear a yes, I say, well, why aren't you returning? Things like this. And what these questions do, and I ask, what do you see above you, below you, to the right, to the left, all over. And this helps to just give me a general sense of the location. Is he in the woods? Is he in a city? And I don't like to know anything beforehand. If someone calls me and says, oh, we live on acres and acres of land, acres and acres of woods, that just messes it up for me because then I'm not really sure. Am I seeing woods because the animal, from the animal, or from my mind? Because the mind wants to project and make things up. So I don't want to know anything, just name, age, gender. And age isn't really even important. I'm just sort of nosy sometimes, but I get that information. And then, so after that, then I do, I'm stuttering. I do remote viewing as well. And this helps because if I'm not getting too much from the animal, and this is sort of like a partial remote viewing, because a real remote viewing, you have no information at all. You go in blind. All you have are four numbers. or a bunch of numbers, coordinates. And it's interesting how with just numbers, you begin to get information from the target site. You begin to see what you're supposed to be looking at. So this is not a full-on remote viewing. I'm using it with animal communication. I already have the photo. My mind is already front-loaded. So with that being said, it helps because, for example, one time I wasn't getting very much from this animal at all. It was a cat. And I did a remote viewing and I actually saw an aerial view of the map. I saw a cul-de-sac. And now, if you live in an area like I do with a zillion cul-de-sacs, then that's not going to help you. And it doesn't really matter sometimes if I get very little information or a lot. It doesn't matter as to whether you're going to find your animal or not. The process is just very interesting that way. So in this case, I saw a cul-de-sac and I saw a roof of a building that was very odd. I mean, it was long and it was sort of curvilinear, but it was angular at the same time. And I looked on the map and there was one cul-de-sac in her area. And it was in the direction that I had dowsed. And it had a roof very similar. Well, he wasn't there, but it turned out he was west of the cul-de-sac. And it was another building with the same similar roof. And the way she found her animal was she listened to her hunch. And hunches are so important because that's your divine guidance. And it was 10:30 at night, no sightings, animal gone 2 or 3 weeks, but she had a hunch. The house I described, there was an iron fence I described, and this parking lot with this building, and it was near the cul-de-sac. So she pulled in at 10:30 at night, and she just got out of her car and she sat there for 2 hours calling his name, and he finally popped out of the bushes. So that's remote viewing and how that helps and why I use it. And then after that, there's 2 more parts to this. It's a long process, but after this, I use a pendulum and I go over the chakras again to validate. Now I could do this in the beginning and get the information instantly, but I don't because I don't want anything to influence me. My chakra reading is always accurate, but I save it to last. I use it as a validation. So I look at the chakras, and if that root chakra is off balance, then the animal's lost because that's your grounding, your foundation, your security. If the animal has an established routine, getting food consistently, the root chakra will be balanced. If the heart chakra is balanced with that, then he's got a connection with a human. So it doesn't mean he's inside, but he's got a connection with a human and all his needs are met. So that really tells me a lot there. And then the last part is dowsing. I don't dowse maps. I have my own method. I dowse a general direction and an approximate distance. And then I look on the map and I actually, if I can, if you live in a very rural area, I'm not able to, but if I can, I get a street view and I drive around and I look for things that resonate with my findings. And believe it or not, it's funny, but I'm choosing homes at random just to show the person visually what I'm the feeling tone of what I saw in the session. And sometimes they find the animal at that home. It's not often, but it's just funny how the universe works like that. That's my entire process. It's a long process.
How long does that process generally take?
I hate to say it, but by the time I email everything to the client and we maybe even talk afterwards, it can take 3 to 4 hours. And
That's a significant amount of time.
It's a lot of time. I just let it go. I mean, it's done when it's done. I can't time myself. And sometimes I don't get anything and I have to sit again and again and again. So it's not like I sit and I always get information. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
I feel like you're teaching a master class in animal communication for all of the students of animal communication to really listen to everything you're saying, and how, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it's right there, sometimes I get a lot of information, sometimes I get a little information. All of these things that you're sharing around this process of locating lost animals is really relevant for any kind of animal communication, I think.
It is. And one thing too, now that you said that, uh, I was never really, I was never taught this by, my teachers, is that a lot of animals are not found. And that is just the truth. And I've been working on cases with other, you know, uh, communicators who are specializing in lost animals, maybe sometimes 4 or 5 of us, and even working with a master map dowser who's not doing it anymore. I mean, this man was old school map dowser looking for, water under the wells. I mean, he was just very seasoned. And even working with him and everyone else, animal was never found. So they're not always found.
What is it like to work with several people on a team like that, a dowser, other animal communicators?
It can get confusing for the client if we get different dowsing directions and if we get different information. And people always ask, why, well, you said he's in the woods and she's telling me, or they'll say, well, you're saying he's inside and she's telling me he's outside. So which is it? And it could be both. One of us could be wrong, or it could be both. Animals don't stay still, obviously, they move around. Uh, Everyone picks up on different aspects. I might pick up, well, I'll tell you an interesting story. Sometimes a communicator could be picking up on past energy and they don't realize it. And one time I was working with 2 other remote viewers and with Harvey the tortoise, and he was found. And this is the only reason we know this. Um, but it turned out I was seeing Harvey when he first started out. I had described his little path, his little journey out to the roadside where he was picked up. The second remote viewer, my friend Philippe in Sweden, he saw Harvey at a pond. And the third remote viewer, Tanya in Arizona, she saw Harvey with people. It turned out Philippe had picked up on the intermediate journey. The people I had seen pick up Harvey, brought him to the pond, and they left him. And then they thought, wait, he didn't have webbed feet. So they went back and got Harvey, and so he was with them. So all 3 of us were correct. Of course, in this case, you want present energy. You don't want past energy. But that's another reason why animal communicators could pick up different information. But mainly, or sometimes if the animal's in spirit, then that happens a lot. We all get different information. And so there's a lot of reasons why it differs. And but sometimes if we're all getting the same direction, then we're all very happy about that. And so the client can really focus more on one direction instead of going to several.
And I think that this really, again, it illustrates kind of it's a specific problem, a lost pet, but it really indicates the general nature of animal communication, energy work, using intuition with, having to get, and even when you ask, sometimes you don't get, is this present time or not? You may not get the clarity about that. And it might be present, it might be past. And there's just a bit of wiggle room with the whole process that you have to kind of stick with it. And like you shared that example of the woman who just followed her nudge in her heart to go sit in a place for 2 hours until it worked out. That I think is as much of a determining factor as anything else. The mindset and the energy of the person and what they're willing to do.
The 2 things I want to bring up. One thing is sometimes, in terms of the universe, just really behind the whole, really directing the whole show. There was one time when my wrong dowsing actually found the animal, because I had dowsed 3 minutes away, and I described this bread and breakfast place. Well, the woman went there, and at that moment, the owner came out telling her to get off her property. Long story short, it turns out the owner had seen the kitten following a boy, and she happened to know who the boy was and where he lived. Well, she goes and finds her kitten. It was actually 1 mile away at this point. But if I hadn't brought her, to the B&B, she never would have met the woman. So I always tell people, of course, when people are devastated and distraught and panicked, they don't always want to hear this. But really, so much of this work depends on divine intervention and divine timing. And just to give you a few examples, well, this one cat who had shown me, well, he was behind a fence, and everything he described was, it turns out it was in the back of the house. Now, how's a person supposed to find him if she doesn't know I never saw the front of the house. Usually I'll try and ask the animal to walk with me and show me, or I'll do remote viewing. But in this case, I didn't know. He was showing me the back of the house. But I had gotten a wide driveway, and I wasn't going to tell her, because I thought to myself, oh God, how generic is this? A driveway, really? But I know from experience not to hold anything back. You can't let your intellect get in the way. You hear something, you whatever you sense, give it out. And so I said, this is going to sound kind of, ridiculous, but he's showing me a wide driveway. Turns out she lived in New Orleans, and it was like New York City. No one had driveways except one home that was, I said, 5 homes away northwest. She went there, fence, looked over, there's the cat. But what are the chances of her looking over the fence at that moment? The cat could have been on the other side of the house, could have been inside, could have been somewhere else, could have been hiding, didn't want to come out. So, divine timing. And there's this one more example that it was just mind-boggling. The woman had told us that when the movers came to her house, her indoor cat slipped outside. And again, I think all of us, there's 4 of us working on this case, I think all of us were front loaded with that information, because all of us saw the cat outside. Keep that in mind. So 3 weeks go by, cat's not showing up. So one night, again, divine timing, divine intervention. The boyfriend's painting the house, and she's upset, doesn't want to smell the chemicals. So she wants to leave. It's nighttime. Where is she going to go? She grabs her son and says, well, I think I'll go to my storage unit and put some things away. Goes to the storage unit 5 miles away. And while she's working in there, she's about to leave, and she hears a meow. It was her cat. It turned out he had jumped in one of the boxes, and the movers and took him away to the storage unit. But she followed her hunch. And so it was, everything, as tragic as things are, I mean, everything is a blessing. I mean, it was a blessing that her boyfriend annoyed her enough to paint the house and get her to, if the universe, if an animal is going to be found, the universe will set it up to happen. And really, I have to say that divine timing and divine intervention is 90% of this work. It doesn't matter how skillful any communicator is. The outcome has nothing to do with us. That's my opinion. And of course, I don't tell that to a lot of people unless they're open to hearing it.
Well, and understanding that you're a vehicle, you're a channel for information that could trigger the right place at the right time. So you're just another tool that the universe has to give information, to plant seeds, to create something to happen within the person that will get them to the right place at the right time.
Quantum physics. I love it. Exactly. Exactly. And there's times when, like this cat in New Orleans, I mean, she actually found him 10 minutes after the session, and that happens, but not often.
Yeah, I'm just thinking too of, some of my more dramatic lost pet cases. One cat I checked in with every single day for 3 weeks. And then they, reunited. And then the person had to have a conversation and really let go of controlling, everything that happens to that cat. It was a great growing thing. I've had people, that I met on the street looking for their lost cat. I'm like, go look for the orange house 2 blocks down. And they went and they found it. Where did that information come from?
Exactly. I didn't know you worked with lost animals too.
I kind of do a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, then you totally understand the process.
Oh, yeah, very much. And I love what you're sharing. And in fact, I want to ask you 2 questions about what are your recommendations, or what do you want people who have lost pets to know? And what do you want students who want to get better at locating lost pets? What do you want them to know? But you could choose which one you want to start with.
Well, well, for people who are trying to learn how to do this, it's very challenging. If animals aren't found, you have to believe in yourself. And after all these years, I'm really hard on myself. If animals aren't found, I think, well, I missed something. Sometimes I'll do like multiple sessions because I keep thinking, well, maybe I'll hit it this time. But we really have to understand what I explained before, that we can only be a tool, provide as much information as possible to enhance your search. So it's a challenging thing to do, and um, the more questions you ask the animal, that is as good to get as much information from them as possible. And practice, dowsing. I noticed that if I do a remote viewing practice target and then I douse the map afterwards, I've had some accuracy, but I don't trust my map dowsing at this point to experiment with a client, so I just do my own thing. But if you're going to be a dowser, you really need to practice, because you don't want to be. All of us are wrong once in a while, of course, but I mean, you don't want to be misguiding, the person. It's a responsibility. Well, I guess all of it is, but this especially, I think. And what else did you ask me about?
So, and I'm just going to kind of jump in here and say, and just kind of recap, because you've brought up dowsing, you've brought up remote viewing, you also use pendulums, you use animal communication. So there are a lot of tools, if you're drawn to a tool beyond just the animal communication piece, that can be very, very helpful for students
Yes,
to
some
work with.
communicators use I don't do this, but some communicators work with their power animal, and the power animal will help them. I have a colleague who works with her deceased dog. She feels that her deceased dog always helps to lead, to reveal where the location is. So everyone has their own, yeah, everyone brings on with them their own tools.
And you're such a great role model for bringing in a team. You don't have to do it alone. You can bring in other people with other specialties.
There's one person in particular that we work together a lot, and I really like working with her because we can compare notes, and it makes it takes the load off me. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed, and that's my problem, but I do become very overwhelmed with this whole process of finding lost animals.
So Diana, what are your recommendations for people who've lost a pet who are working with an animal communicator? What
Oh,
advice do you have for them?
yes, good question. Good question. Very good question. there's a way to search. Number one, people always, not always, but people sometimes will get back to me 30 minutes later and they'll say, well, I went there. She's not there. And you don't know you don't know if she's there or she's not there. Number, animals move, actually, obviously they're not statues. So by the time you get there, they may have moved on. Another common thing is that they're hiding and they won't come out and they won't. And people will say, well, she's very bonded with me and she's very vocal. Doesn't matter. If they're trapped, they're not going to answer you. I'll just give you one example. When I tuned into this one cat, she just showed me, and I love it when I just get one image and it doesn't change, then I know there's no more to say. She was showing me this garage, but there was an alley and there was this and there was that. Anyway, I did my screenshot thing, my driving around, and I saw it on the map, and I told her. She says, oh, that's my garage. I've already been in there. I've already looked. And I said, well, look again. Oh, no, she's not in there. I always hear that, and I have to I have to be very assertive and say, you need to look again. So I had her on the phone and she's out there. She opened up the garage about 6 inches and we were talking on the phone for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, the cat popped her head out. She was in there the entire time. But the point is, when you're looking for a lost animal, you can't just call the name and keep walking. You can't open up a garage. And I'm focusing on cats a lot, but even I'll give you a dog example in a moment. But you can't just open up a garage and look and you have to search every nook and cranny. I live basically in one room and I can't sometimes find my own cats. I swear they become invisible. So you have to keep going. There was one I'll tell you about the dog in a moment, but there was one case, very interesting, when you're doing animal communication and you're seeing from the animal's eyes. One cat had showed me a wall, and showing me she couldn't get over it. She couldn't get around it. Showed me a river, the dog, the gray home. My dowsing was 2 doors down, the gray house. But the person had been there twice already, all around the property and in the basement. So 3 weeks go by and the woman listened to her hunch. She's driving down the road and she thought, well, this is exactly what Diana described. I'm going to try it one more time. She goes into the basement. It's a good thing her neighbors didn't think she was wacky. I mean, 3 times in the same basement, the neighbors say, okay, come on in, And so she goes in and she finds the cat. Now, it turned out the cat was not outside. I thought the cat was outside. I couldn't figure out, well, why can't she get around the wall if she's outside? It turns out there was a window in the basement and the cat was looking through the window and showing me what was out there. So that's why it could get confusing sometimes. If I'm not seeing a lot or if I feel a confined feeling, or sometimes, I'll see shelving or I'll see, garden tools and I know it's a shed, but sometimes, it's hard to know for certain. But usually, a person should check all their neighbors' garages, have them open them up if possible. And even dogs, they will not answer you. It's really good sometimes if I could get a landmark. And this one dog, with one case, I had seen a house that looked like a Cape Cod style, and there were no Cape Cod houses in this part of Pennsylvania except for one. So she goes to the house, no dog. She's leaving and she sees 2 young boys and says, have you seen my dog? And they said, yeah, she's right there between those 2 houses in the woods. So she goes and she finds her dog. And as soon as her dog sees her, the dog goes away from her. The dog starts going away. So what she did was she just turned her back. It was very hard for her to do. And she just walked away from the dog. And after a while, the dog joined her. So, it's very hard. I've had people find their dog but the dog won't come to them. They set a trap. which I always tell people, set a trap. If you get a sighting, set a trap. But the dog wouldn't go in the trap. Took 2 months setting the trap before the dog would go in. So this is why you can't ask if the neighbor says your dog's not here, it doesn't mean they're not there. And you really have to, if something resonates description wise or anything along like that, then you really have to keep at it. You can't just assume that they're not there. That's really important to know when you're searching for your animal.
Absolutely. There's so many pieces to this puzzle, and you kind of have to be willing to go between pieces and come back to the same piece and put them all together in different ways at different times. And, your stories are so encouraging because even when it may take weeks or even months, there can still be a happy ending. And I think that's a really important message to leave people with.
Mm-hmm.
Diana, any final thoughts that you want to share with our viewers about locating lost pets?
Well, I would just like to say, if a communicator says, your animal is passed on, and then they return home, don't be angry at the communicator because there's so many turns and twists in this work. And the line between life and death is very subtle. And sometimes we miss it. And you really have to, you have to understand that it's a process, and the outcome really is beyond anyone's control. And you have to, like you said, it's really important to surrender and to see the blessings. And there's always a lesson to be learned through every heartbreak, right? And so it's no different here. Our animals are teachers and healers, even when they're missing. There's a lesson here for us to see.
It's not always the lesson we want, but it's the lesson we got. Diana DelMonte, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and experience and insights. And I want to say not just the tips and the tools, but also the whole big picture of animal communication from your years of experience. It's just been so wonderful to learn from you today. And I know people are going to want to stay in touch with you, and you have created a free gift just for this summit for everybody called Why You Should Listen When Your Animals Don't, How Your Animal's Behavior and Health Mirror Who You Are. This is your other passion, your other area of expertise. Do you want to tell people more about this free gift that you have for them?
Yes, it's an ebook that I made especially for the summit, and it's a little short version of the paperback that I have out, and it gives a couple of case studies of different categories, but all about how animals usually mirror behavior problems are so often a mirror of what's going on with us. And so it gives examples of when, like, for example, when you're not really being honest, not that you're being dishonest, but you're not telling your animal everything. For example, do you want to hear some examples?
I think we kind of need to wrap up, but I think that's intriguing enough.
I have a tendency to just go on for hours. Okay, yeah, well, the book will cover what happens when we're not being mindful of our thoughts, when we're repressing our emotions, when we're not speaking out, when we're pee issues, why animals pee in the home, our thoughts about dying, how that affects our animal, all different aspects on how an animal's behavior will mirror what's going on inside your own life.
This sounds super, super helpful and probably eye-opening for a lot of people. We have a button right here on this viewing page that will connect you directly to Diana's website so that you can get that ebook that she created just for us. And if for some reason you don't want to click on that button right now because you're listening, you can always go to dianadelmonte.com and you can get that there. And Diana has agreed to come back and actually talk about this very topic in a bonus interview. And you can watch that bonus interview when you purchase an all access pass. Your all access pass gives you lifetime access to all of the presentations, all the interviews, all the bonus interviews in the summit, and you can have it in videos and MP3s and all kinds of great stuff for as long as you want. Watch it on all your different devices. The price does go up when the summit ends, so act now to get the best value and get more of Diana's wisdom on lost pets and behavioral issues, which are her two main areas of expertise. So we get to learn from an experienced teacher. Diana DelMonte, thank you so much for sharing all of your tips and insights with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been fun.
I've learned a lot and I've had a lot of fun too. And I hope all of you guys watching have as well. Come on over to the Animal Wisdom Insiders Facebook group to join the conversation and share what insight you got from Diana's presentation today. We would love to hear from you and connect with you there. And until next time, have a beautiful day. Bye, everybody.